Hi, I'm Matthew Sadler.
And I'm WIM Natasha Regan. Welcome to this video on AlphaZero Opening Novelties. And in this video, we are looking at the French Winawer. This is really topical because yesterday in the candidates, MVL played 7h4 in the French Winawer against Nepomniachtchi. And this is AlphaZero's favourite line as well. There was a lovely game in Game Changer with AlphaZero playing the line with 7h4 in the French Winawer. MVL's game yesterday was a really great game, so we're going to look at that game, and we're also going to look at a previously unpublished game of AlphaZero against Stockfish, where AlphaZero played the same line as MVL up until move 16. There, AlphaZero played knight e2 and MVL played queen d1. So both are really great games, and we're going to show you them now.
Yeah, really interesting. Let's get into them. Okay, let's have a look at this game then. So we start off with 1e4. e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, e5.
The Winawer.
The Winawer, indeed. c5, a3, bishop takes, and knight e7. The main line of the Winawer for black. So one very interesting possibility is queen g4, and actually we've actually done a video on this already. It was one of the games played from TSEC specified openings, and AlphaZero came up with again with a very interesting idea in this line. After c takes d4, the so-called poison pawn variation, AlphaZero played this very unusual move, queen d3, which gave white an appreciable advantage, and was actually used by a German grandmaster to defeat another very strong player in the World Cup. So I mean that's AlphaZero, even in a line it doesn't really play as the main line, it found something very interesting. But AlphaZero's favourite idea, you can't be too surprised, is to play h4 in this position. So this has been played. It's not AlphaZero's invention. This has been played quite a bit. Even in human chess, and the idea of h4 to h5 to h6 is quite common in the French, just because black's exchange off the dark square bishops, so putting a pawn on h6 is doing a nice job of weakening those dark squares.
Kasparov used to like this line.
Yeah, there's a fantastic game, which we quote in Game Changer as well, actually, Kasparov against Nikolic, that actually had very similar parallels to another AlphaZero Stockfish game in this line. But, okay, so Stockfish played queen c7, so did Nepomniachtchi. And here AlphaZero plays rook b1.
Now, there is an alternative here. In Game Changer, we've got a game where AlphaZero plays h5.
That's right, and the game we show is actually this very sharp line where black grabs some central pawns in return for losing a lot of time and getting his queen rather awkward. Which actually resembles very greatly the game Kasparov-Nikolic. So MVL played h5 in this position. So he obviously wasn't afraid of sacrificing the central pawns. But the game transposes actually. So after rook b1, b6, h5, h6, we're back into MVL Nepomniachtchi. And here AlphaZero played the typical move, and MVL as well, queen g4. Attacking g7. So black's got to decide how to defend this pawn. A natural move is knight f5, but then bishop d3 is rather awkward after you're threatening to take on f5 and g7. So you've still got to work out something to do with that g7 pawn. Well, if you're a French player, then there's a natural move. To anyone else, it feels very unnatural, but you could play king f8. To defend the g7 pawn, and actually AlphaZero played some other games against Stockfish in this line, and teed up immediately on the kingside with rook h3 to f3. Queen f4, knight ec6, bishop d2, takes, knight a6, rook e1, rook f8, knight e2, knight e7, g4. And, well, I mean, AlphaZero just teed up on the kingside with knight g3, g5, and, well, got a huge advantage. Won quite a few of those games. So, what they actually do then is, there's this move, rook g8, which is actually just delaying committing the king. So, you can imagine that if white plays now a plan with rook h3 to f3 and queen f4, you'll just be able to go rook f8 to defend the f7 pawn. So that just slows white down a little bit. So white plays another standard plan, which is to throw in this bishop b5 check.
Yeah, and here black doesn't want to play bishop d7 because black ideally wants to exchange off those light squared bishops with bishop a6. So if black played bishop d7, white could avoid that by dropping back.
Exactly. You know, that's the a very typical French motif there. So black actually in this position plays king f8 and keeps the threat of bishop a6. So MVL and AlphaZero played bishop d3. I think actually AlphaZero also tried d takes. Oops, I'm terribly sorry. Also tried d takes c5 in one game as well, which is interesting. But we'll see that well, on the very next move, both MVL and AlphaZero played d takes c5. I mean, why are you doing this? It looks a little bit odd in a way to give up your beautiful centre. But essentially, I mean, with a black king on f8 and the rook on g8, you know, very self-blocking, how are you going to get that rook on g8 into play? It makes sense just for the long term to open up some lines. I mean, you're not going to win the game, you know, straight away with a mating attack, but the more lines you've got open, you know, the more chance you have to to make a decisive breakthrough later. So after bishop takes d3, c takes d3, Nepomniachtchi played this very subtle idea, knight d7. The idea is, you know, black's threatening, you know, either to play knight takes c5 or to take back with a knight on c5, which would then attack d3. So what's actually happening here is that white is being forced to play d3 to d4 to defend the pawn on e5 and the pawn on c5, and then black takes on c5 afterwards. So basically, you've just forced white to make the center a little bit more static. So this is the really interesting point of the game here, because here the paths of AlphaZero and MVL diverge.
Yeah, so here MVL played queen d1, and actually we think that's quite an AlphaZero-like move, because AlphaZero has this strategy of whenever the piece has stopped being useful on a particular square, then it immediately redeploys it. So MVL's queen d1 is immediately redeploying the queen away from the square where it's no longer useful. But look at white's pieces now, they're all on the back rank, ready to be redeployed.
Yeah, there was one, there's a very funny guy on Twitter called Mr. Dodgy who showed this diagram and said, is this how the French attack? You know, just with all the pieces on the back rank. But it's a very interesting moment. I mean, Queen D1 looks very strange, but it's quite a typical motif in the French. The idea is that with a move like Queen G4, you've extracted some concessions, haven't you? I mean, the king's had to move to F8, black's self-blocking. So do you think you're going to achieve much more from that square? Well, you might argue that you're not. So what you do, you get you redeploy the queen, bring it back to D1. I mean, after all, there's some open lines on the queen side, so you might want to try and exploit those. And then you're going to complete your development, and also the queen's getting out of the way of the general advance of the kingside pawns with F4 and G4 and F5. And I mean, actually, in the game, this strategy works out beautifully in MVL's game. I mean, it's a real classic. The game that he played, and we'll have a look at how that went after. I mean, 92 is also very, very interesting. What AlphaZero is saying there is that the queen on g4 can still perform some useful work. I mean, just in general, of course, if you do move the queen away from the king side, then that might give black an opportunity to, well, develop his king, get his other rook into play. So in that way, you're stopping it. And what we see with AlphaZero's plan is that that queen is actually going to support the push of the pawn g4 to g5, and then target the kingside dark squares. So yeah, I mean, it's both plans are very, very interesting. And, well, in both cases, I do have to say it's, you sort of think, well, in both cases, is this really the sort of position that a human would want to defend? Because, I mean, it really takes a huge amount of calculation, every move, I think, from Stockfish in the game against AlphaZero to keep things at bay. So, how did the MVL game go? Well, let's just show you that one, because that was very interesting. So queen a5, bishop d2, and now I think that Nepomniachtchi played probably a less good move here. Well, I mean, I ran some engine games between an NN and Stockfish, so between Fat Fritz, which is basically Leela, and Stockfish. And Stockfish was playing this move, queen a3, which I think during the live commentary, Magnus said, well, that's the only move. In principle, if you're going to suffer, grab a pawn. And what Stockfish did was get its knight on c4 in this way. I mean, intuitively that's quite nice. I mean, the only worrying thing is, of course, that the white rook on the Bfile roams free. But somehow, Stockfish managed to keep it together. But I mean, it was very, very uncomfortable. What Nepomniachtchi did was play rook b8, knight e2, and c4. Well, we're going to see this plan c4 in the AlphaZero Stockfish game, but I think that here, I think that it's less successful than when Stockfish played it, simply because when you put a pawn on c4, you're really taking a square that you'd love to have for your knight to get it active, and of course with the white queen on the queen side, black's chances to really get any play on the b-file are not great, because well, obviously he's still got to fight for the b-file. Black's still got to get that rook on g8 active. And what actually happens is that well, I mean, it just turns into an absolute classic, really, a classic demonstration of how one side with more mobility defeats another. Because MVL gets all the moves he wants, a4, rook b4, which is an absolutely gorgeous idea. You're just going to sacrifice the exchange, you don't mind that at all, just in order to career through on the king side. So, for example, if black took on b4, c takes b4, well, rook b4, there's this move queen c3, as the commentators pointed out. And if you play queen a6, you're playing f5. And, well, to be honest, this is very AlphaZero-like, it has to be said, just, sacrificing the exchange and then, just, breaking through, knight f4's coming in. It's really unpleasant. So, Nepomniachtchi played knight e7 again, rook b1, f5, trying to block the king side. So that's one of the things, because the white queen's not on the king side. Black can try and move the king out. I mean, I think I saw some engine games where we're playing e takes f6 and then just trying to break through on the king side anyway. But what MVL did was really strong as well. I mean, this bishop is activated. The bishop that the black swapped off on the on the fifth move is coming back to haunt black now, and then MVL just broke through on the king side. And, this was absolutely huge. It was really, really, really strong. Knight comes into g3. And just the interesting thing about this game was that, I mean, material is equal here, but just the black pawns are so weak. But the interesting thing that's, not completely obvious is that, this whole formation with the king on g2, it just keeps all the perpetuals at bay, and then white can just come in and grab all the pawns with its own queen. And here Nepomniachtchi played the desperate g5 and h5, and after g7 he resigned because the white pawn is queening. I mean, a really, really classy game from MVL. You know, it's a really excellent game. But let's have a look then to see how AlphaZero's game went. So it played knight e2, rook b8, takes, castles. And now, you know, if black doesn't react, now white's got his king castle, then white's going to play d takes c5. And obviously that queen on g4 is really active, can swing to both sides. So here, Stockfish played c4. And, you know, it's more reasonable, I think, in this position because, well, white's not fighting that quickly for the b-file. So it's going to be quite difficult for white to fight for there. And, well, in the meantime, black might get some counterplay, you know, going on the queen side with queen b3 or queen b1. In actual fact, AlphaZero finds quite an unusual little way of fighting for the b-file. I hadn't expected it at all. Rook d2.
So these rooks coming around via d2 and b2.
Exactly. I can just actually show you just another game that was played. In that game, Stockfish played queen b1, and that led to some interesting, just an interesting theme that pops up all the time. Although it doesn't in the variations, although it doesn't actually pop up actually in our game. So rook d2, queen b3. It's a less good move, I think, queen b1. King h2, getting out of the way, rook b2, queen d1, and then this move a4. Just like in the MVL game, white wants to get the bishop on c1 active. So also threatening a5, moving the knight away from b6. So black's forced to take with the queen on a4. And then you play knight g3 and you're out of this pin. What's particularly crucial is that what you're going to do now, it looks a little bit slow, but you're going to come round to d2 with the queen. And then you're now going to evict the black queen away from the queen side. The bishop comes to a3. Here Stockfish played this incredible defensive move, putting the queen on h7. And the white queen comes round to a1. So I mean, this is actually, it's, you know, pretty similar to the MVL game in a way.
So it's funny how white managed to completely control the queen side from having all its pieces on the king side a minute ago.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, from that point of view, you see what the logic is of MVL's move. You know, just go to the queen side immediately. You know, but somehow Stockfish managed to hold this. But I mean, it really was. I mean, I think a human would lose this within just 10 moves simply. You know, it's just white's breaking through with f5, and you know, it's really really very, very strong. So so that's very interesting. But there's that interesting theme of a4. But in this game, I think queen b3 is a better move. Rook d2, knight b6, blocking the a file. Rook b2, queen d1, king h2. So yeah, I mean, what black's managed to do, black's kind of hanging on to the white pieces. You know, that queen on d1, pinning the knight on e2, attacking the bishop on c1. Knight on b6 is blocking the rook on b2. Yeah, I mean, for the moment, black's keeping white at bay. You know, the question is, how long can you do this for? So rook h8, that was Stockfish's move. Actually looking for probably king g8 to h7. You know, that'll be one of those ideas. So we get a couple of shuffling little moves where both sides seem to be testing each other out. Queen h4 stops king g8 because of queen e7. Rook g8, queen f4, knight c6, queen g4, rook h8, queen f3, just moving around. But now Stockfish goes for a great plan, I have to say. Really unusual. And astounded it works. Astounding it's possible, to be honest, but it seems to. Knight a5. So I mean, black's looking for knight b3, stopping the white rook from ever activating itself on the queen side. So rook b5, the rook jumps out, and now knight b3. And actually, if you look at the white rook in this position, it just can't actually proceed any further. So c5 and a5 is covered by the knight on b3. And if the rook drops back to b4 to try and come round to a4, that's covered by the knight on b6. It's this sort of pincer movement by the knights. Really.
The two knights are kind of blocking that rook in.
Yeah, really unusual. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like that. It's really, but I was sort of looking at it, whilst playing through the game and thinking, but come on, I mean, you've got no pieces on the king side really now. Are you sure you can hold on? But well,
maybe White wants to get this A4 move in again.
Some stage you would expect it to play to go for A4. In this case, AlphaZero played G4, going for it in this way and playing G5. Going to open the king side and then aim for the queen side for the king side dark squares. The really funny thing about this is that that rook on H8, it's horrifically placed in some ways, but of course when White plays G4 to G5, it's suddenly not that badly placed as a defensive piece, because it's attacking that pawn on H5. It reminds me a little bit of the King's Indian Bishop. You have it on G7 all the game, and then you wait and wait and wait, and all of a sudden you get E5, E4, and all of a sudden it becomes the best piece on the board. So maybe the stock.
So in that way, it's surprising that White is going for G4 and G5.
Well, that's true. I mean, we've shown a number of games. I think, what was it, Python Squeeze, where in Game Changer, where AlphaZero just when the rook was on H8, it didn't go G4, G5. It played F4 to F5. The only thing is, in this position, the black queen is so active that it's really stopping White, from playing anything like F4 to F5. I mean, you've just got to take the breaks that you've got, basically. So here, really unusual plan as well. So Stockfish sees that G4 to G5 is coming. So Stockfish plays Queen A1 and brings the queen right back to defend. Amazing what Stockfish does with its queen. I mean, the queen as a defensive piece, that's such a big defensive theme for Stockfish. We looked at it in the defense chapter in Game Changer quite a bit. It's really excellent. But anyway, AlphaZero, it was hitting the rook on B5 there. So AlphaZero tees up with knight G3, queen H4 and H6. Getting in its plan, that queen is proving very useful on the queen side, just supporting H5 to H6. King H3, and things look desperate for Stockfish, because the kingside dark squares have been exposed. That knight is going to come into H5 to F6, bishop H6, and if you play something like knight D7, to cover the kingside dark squares, well, all of a sudden that's your pentagon, and the rook on B4 is active. But okay, what's happening here? Shogi. That's what's happening. The king is running.
Time for the king to run.
Exactly. There's this old shogi proverb, just to explain, that Natasha and I are really into shogi at the moment. So you've probably seen some videos on our Game Changer channel about shogi. One of the old shogi proverbs is that to run with the king early saves 8 tempi. So probably not that much in chess, but it does help. And actually, Stockfish just gives away the exchange along the way. But it's actually a very confusing position, this. It looks like White's done absolutely great, but somehow it's very hard for White to make good progress because, its rook is still held in that pincer grip. And of course, all the light squares have been very much weakened now. So the black queen's going to be able to give a huge amount of checks. And in actual fact, the game ended in simply in a perpetual. AlphaZero was, I think, estimating its position around 52% expected score. Stockfish is accessing it as 0.00, and we get a perpetual check happening very, very quickly there. So I mean, stellar defense by Stockfish in this game. But I think, that's a pretty good example of, the difficulty of the task that Nepomniachtchi was giving himself by playing this line as black. Just all along the way, you've got to have this incredible, ability to know when you should be looking for counterplay and restricting the opponent's pieces, when you should be heading back. That's very, very difficult. But I thought it was, quite beautiful. Just these two games, and then, the two ideas, Queen D1, Knight E2. It's quite interesting as well because I played quite a few engine games, at reasonably fast time controls. I think 10 minutes plus 5 seconds. And actually, so the neural net I was using, FatFritz, which is again basically the Leela neural net, that varied between, if I set it this position, sometimes it played Queen D1, sometimes it played Knight E2. So obviously it feels that that those those possibilities both have something to offer. But anyway, a great game by MVL, and well, I think you'll agree, also a very, very interesting game between AlphaZero and Stockfish. So there we are. I mean, I hope you enjoyed those games. Just the standard call to action. If you haven't subscribed to our channel,
please do subscribe.
Yes, and exactly. And if you haven't taken a look at Game Changer yet, then
have a look. It's a really lot of really interesting games in there.
Yeah, no, really interesting stuff. A lot about Stockfish's defence that we see in back in this game. And otherwise, please keep safe and keep on watching, because we've got a lot more games, and probably we'll have end up looking at quite a few more Frenches as well in the coming months as well. Okay, thanks very much for watching.
Thank you for watching.